Another day without end, another ship going out, another day of anger, bitterness, and doubt. I know how it happened. I saw it begin. I opened my heart to the world, and the world came in. Welcome to Songs of Experience, a Bob Dylan podcast where we explore the man and the music one song at a time. I'm your host, Henry Bernstein, and I'm thrilled to be sitting across from my friend, mentor, podcaster, brilliant interviewer, beloved professor, and critically acclaimed author, Erin Callahan, here to talk about False Prophet, the second track off of Dylan's 2020 album, Rough and Rowdy Ways. Hello, Erin.
Hello, Henry. I think that was way too nice. And are we sure we're talking about false prophet?
I hope we're talking about False
We
Prophet.
are. We are. I'm just making fun of myself there. No, that
Yeah.
was very generous. It was a very generous intro, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And it's more than mutual. I just adore you and all the work that you do. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. We're lucky because we're now actually friends in real life and have
IRL.
hung out in person on more than one occasion.
I
I'm sort of
know.
losing track of how many times we've hung out now. So
I mean,
it
I feel like
all
I've
in the service of Bob Dylan. So
Yes. We were talking about that when I was in Chicago recently, interviewing you, filming you for my podcast, which I filmed early. But we've seen each other, or we've seen Dylan together. Wait, okay, three in
seven, I think you
Chicago.
said 7 times. I think that's what
It
you
was
said.
three in Chicago, the Beacon, two in Memphis, and then six, right?
Maybe it's six then. Oh, an
Yeah, I
outlaw
think.
tour.
Oh, yeah, the Outlaw
Yeah.
Tour. That's the
Yeah.
seventh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's amazing. I feel very lucky. I'm so glad we're doing this, and I'm so
Me
glad
too.
to usher in Rough and Rowdy Ways on this podcast with, I mean, one of my favorite songs on the album. But before
Yeah.
we get into that, Erin, we're back here for an interview again. This time the tables are turned. So, Erin Callahan, what is your Bob Dylan origin story?
Oh, I feel like I've told this a lot, but I'm happy to tell it. So I know that Dylan played in my childhood. I know because my stepdad who is essentially raised me. So I say my dad, and if I go in and out and code switch that way, then you'll know. But he's a huge hippie. I mean, he loves that the Beatles, Dylan, all that stuff. And so I know I heard Tambourine Man when I was a kid, but when I was 12, he gave me the Bob Dylan lyrics, the one that was on the second floor of the center with the pink cover. And he said, "Take this, brother, may it serve you well," in this hippie way. And it did. I fell in love with the language. And
Do you still
the,
have that book?
I think it's at my parents' house because I don't want to take something that doesn't belong to me. And like he
Ah.
gave it to me to use, but I think it's still part of their
Oh.
library. It wasn't like a gift. It was like, here, read this book.
Oh,
You know, it
in my mind, when you've told that story before to me,
was like a
it
gift.
it was like a here, take this, like passing you
Right.
on the family Bible and you will use it.
I
But okay,
wish, but I have it
got
on
it.
my own. No, I used it. I mean, it's got my handwriting in it. And so there's something in me that's like that needs to stay at my parents' house for safekeeping. And I have my own copy here that has the silver cover on it. It's a later version, but yeah, I have it in my house. But no, I don't think I would have felt comfortable taking that. And maybe I wanted him to like still read, so we had that connection.
Uh-huh.
You
Uh-huh.
know,
That's
because
great.
it's a very deep, father-daughter connection that we have, where I still text him Bob stuff, which is
Yeah,
nice.
I mean those lyrics probably stop a few years before Rough and Rowdy Ways. As often
That's
as I've seen that one and the subsequent editions, on sale at a used
Mhm.
bookstore or something. There's just something about me, I won't buy it because as like a completist, it's not finished. Like
Right.
there's even if like let's say, as of right now, Rough and Rowdy Ways is the last album Bob ever makes, which I don't
No.
think it is. If it came out with an updated version, I still wouldn't want it because it's not complete. Like I would wait until the final one is whatever, and maybe that'll never come, and that's sort of the hope, right?
But isn't that the best part of it? You're like, you have like Keys to the Rain or the Bob Dylan Encyclopedia, and it's so incomplete because it doesn't have
Right.
everything.
Right.
And you're
Right.
like, well, this is where we were at this point, and now
Right.
look how far he's come.
That's a great point. I like that. I like that.
Right.
Well, this, of course, this song, False Prophet, is the second track, as I said, on the album Rough and Rowdy Ways, which was recorded between January and February of 2020. Remember 2020 in
How could we
Sound
forget?
in Sound City, Los Angeles. And while the album was released on June 19th, 2020, this song was released on May 8th. And before I get into
Mhm.
that in a second, the musicians on it are unbelievable. I mean, in addition to Bob's touring band,
Right.
Charlie Sexton, Bob Britt, Donnie Heron, Tony Garnier, and Matt Chamberlain. He had all these amazing additional musicians like Blake Mills, Bent Montek, Alan
It's a
Pasqua.
murderer's row.
And
It's
speaking of
like,
Murderer's Row, Fiona Apple on Murder
right,
Most Foul, right?
right.
So it's an incredible, I mean, just who's who, but not in like an under the red sky way of who's on this album. Just
Mhm.
great people that Bob trusts, and of course, it was produced by Jack Frost. Do you remember where you were when this song was released on May 8th?
You know, I probably was home. Weren't we all?
Yep. Yes, exactly. Oh, we were all on Twitter meeting each other for the first time.
Right. We were all like, we couldn't meet each other in person, so we were all in
Right.
the virtual world. Like, did you hear that?
Right.
Yeah. So I was definitely at home.
Yeah.
Same thing. I think I remember more because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, Murder Most Foul. But I think we were just so starved for anything from the outside world that I do remember this coming in particular. Like, I mean, just being so happy that there
Right.
was something to be happy about,
Right.
right?
Because it came out like a month or so after I Contain Multitudes
Mhm.
and like 6 weeks after Murder Most Foul. And it was like,
Right,
oh, there is an album coming, it's sort
right.
of that my hot take with this song. I remember where I was when I heard it. I was in my bedroom
I
and
was probably in this room.
yeah.
I think I was.
And I remember thinking, this is an unbelievable track. And to this day, I think that those two tracks should be flipped. I think that False Prophet should have opened Rough and Rowdy Ways, and then Multitudes would be second track. And I'll tell you why.
Okay, I was gonna say
For
why. I'm not gonna disagree with you because I am 100% on board with this, but tell me
Well,
why.
first of all, the chutzpah of me and the hubris to suggest an alternate track listing for a Bob Dylan album because the album is pretty much perfect. But
Wait, but now you know what? He's gonna re-release this album and it's gonna be flipped.
my personal preference with Bob Dylan albums, especially in the Jack Frost era, is to open with a banger. So
Okay.
Tweedledee and Tweedledum, Thunder on the Mountain.
Hmm.
That's like my favorite, other than like Rolling Stone, probably. That's I think that's and maybe
Right.
Tangled in Blue. Those are like the best. That's like the best album opener. And then Beyond Here Lies Nothing. I love that opener. So I wanted that. We haven't had a Bob Dylan album since Tempest. I wanted it to be an absolute banger. And I love I Contain Multitudes, and the way it came in was like so beautiful. And I remember where I was
Hmm.
with that. But that's just my personal preference. I think you flip it, bring everyone back down with Multitudes, and then the album kicks into gear.
Is it because it's that opening riff that he
Yes.
took from Billy the Kid Emerson? Like I Loving is Believing, like just that it's so dirty. It makes you feel like you're like that, just that nasty with the distortion. That's what I'm looking
Yes.
for on the
Yes.
guitar. It's like it just puts you in a different place.
Yeah.
Like you are
Absolutely.
then now, like you were in 1954, maybe. It's so good.
That's why I think it should have been the opening track.
It makes me want to misbehave. It really does. That opening riff.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
it for me it reminded me just in like a Bob Dylan comparison, those all those openers that I mentioned from Love and Theft on have these
Right.
great intros. And so like
Hmm.
the Tweedledee and Tweedledum, it fades in
Hmm.
and with that recurring lick. And then Thunder on the Mountain, they're almost doing like a Grateful Dead tuning, sort of like it's intentional licks, but it sort of sounds like they're warming up.
Right.
And and then even Beyond Here Lies Nothing with the trumpet, it's kind of a wake up call. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's that opening riff
So
for sure.
you don't feel that I Contain Multitudes hit the mark in the same way.
I mean, I was so grateful and pleased to have a new Bob Dylan song and it be ushering in the arrival of a new album,
Right.
but it didn't hit the way those for me in Yiddish we call it in our kishkas. It's like in your gut,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
It didn't hit for me the way False Prophet did a month later when
Mhm.
it came out. I was like,
Okay.
oh, we're back. Okay.
Hmm.
So
I'm a
that's when I knew like, oh, this
Yeah.
is going to be an insane album.
I think that's what that is my response to that is like you hear that opening riff and you're like you're awake, you're in it. It's like, okay, give me more now.
Mhm.
That we didn't have. Like I love that in Murder Most Foul he gets us into like a loop, almost like I've told Roberta this a million times, Finnegan's Wake, how it ends at the beginning of a sentence and begins at the end of a sentence, so you're
Okay.
constantly in the loop. And when at the end he says play Murder Most Foul, the only thing you can do is go back and play Murder Most Foul, so you're constantly listening to that, and I love that. But again, it's not a banger, it's not like the opening, and neither is I Contain Multitudes, but that riff, I have that in my notes. It's like that riff gets me every time.
Yeah. Well,
And
so in
it,
terms of like wanting more, so Aaron, why this song? You not only could have picked any song you like, I thought you picked another song.
I thought,
So why False
and
Prophet?
it is so on me. I'm old. What can I say?
Just to kind of
Um,
break kayfabe here for a second, pull back the curtain. Until about 3 hours before this recording, I thought Aaron and I were recording my own version of you, talking about my
and
own
I
version of
agreed to it, but I totally forgot because in my head it was always False Prophet. I have the lovely friendship bracelet from Memphis that says false prophet. Like I wear it every day. I'm not wearing it now because I took my jewelry off, but like I'm like it has always been false prophet. And I think, why false prophet? There is a particular, I think there's a lot going on. There is a lot going on in the song. So not that I think, it's just that that's a fact. But that first, the opening verse, which we like another day without end. It's not that. It's the last two lines. I know how it happened. I saw it begin. I opened my heart to the world, and the world came in. That to me is he's kind of bringing us back to the wicked messenger,
you.
and he was
Mm.
told with these few words, which opened up his heart. If you can't bring good news, don't bring any. And
Hmm.
I'm like, I from the first time I heard it, I was like, wait a minute, I've heard that before. And I mean, we all know that I love Wicked Messenger. And so I just kind of like I kept going over and over again and was like, what is he trying to say? Right. And then I told you earlier. So I think that there's something there that he is protesting, but he says, I ain't no false prophet, which is a double negative. And I texted you earlier, the English professor and me just found something
Yeah.
that the lit professor completely wasn't focused on when I was culling for references. I'm like, is he the false prophet then? Like,
That
is
was
he?
my one of my, my parents were grammar nuts and
Right.
constantly correcting us. It worked, but like
You know,
constantly correcting everything, and they hated double negatives, split
right.
infinitives, like things like that, ending sentences with prepositions. It's things that I can't, the fewer less thing. And now it's things I can't see.
I
So
love your
yes, that
parents so much.
my mom was an
I
English
I
teacher, so
I share that.
so yes, that double negative is it's so interesting when Bob Dylan, the master of words,
Right.
intentionally intentionally uses language in that way.
Yes. So I don't know, is he saying he is the false prophet? Because I mean, one of my favorite interviews, and I know exactly where I was in, it was my first year of coursework for my PhD when the 2004 Ed Bradley interview came out, when he's
Yes.
talking about, the fact that the identity as he perceived himself as opposed to what was put on him. And I think that's what's going on here is he's pushing back against that at the same time that he's also, as I said, weaving himself into
Hmm.
this matrix of just I don't know if it's just American, but like the history of art and culture and music, and layering all of these different allusions on top of each other that kind of speak to, this different type of leadership and different prophets. Like the Tiresias a reference in the second verse is just like it blew my mind because I started to like
Tell
pull
us
the
about
threads of
that.
it.
So the
Okay,
second verse, hello Mary Lou, hello Miss Pearl, my fleet-footed guides
right.
from the underworld. No stars in the sky shine brighter than you. You girls mean business, and I do too.
Right. Okay. So Mary Lou and Miss Pearl. So Mary Lou, Hello Mary Lou, Goodbye Heart, Ricky Nelson. And then Miss Pearl is a Jimmy Wages song that was recorded in the 50s for Sun Records, not released till the 70s. Both of those guys are he includes in philosophy of modern song. And so in the chapter, and I love this quote about Ricky Nelson. It's one I actually quoted in my paper from Tulsa. Ricky made rock and roll part of the family, and not just for us, but all over the world, magically transforming the image on black and white television into the American dream. And so he goes on, mostly it was the records, and then he lists all the people that were also part of that generation. And it said, made people from all nations, including commie countries, fall in love with America. And so for me, there's like these two figures of Mary Lou and Miss Pearl are almost like foils of each other, because on the flip side, so she's like the more polished, more commercial, commodified, version, because of who's singing her. Like Ricky Nelson is singing her, and he was very polished, comes from a television family. And then on the other side, in the chapter on Take Me from This Garden of Evil, Dylan writes, nothing artificial about this song, nothing manufactured or contrived, nothing cosmetic or plastic here. This is the real deal, and it's off the map, no racial bloodlines. This song is no joke. And then he says of Wages, who's a contemporary of Elvis's, Jimmy sees the world for what it is. There's no peace in the valley. This is the garden of corporate lust, sexual greed, gratuitous cruelty, and commonplace insanity, hypnotized masses of people and dyed in the wool assholes. And the singer wants to be delivered from it. Who wouldn't? And it's like,
Oh,
you
so good.
have these two, like, so these two figures, like, if they are in fact alluding to these two songs, then they're these opposite figures. But it's Circe in the Odyssey who tells Odysseus that he has to go to the underworld and meet with Tiresias to get his prophecy about going home. That also leads us back to the beginning of No Direction Home, where he says, I
I
was
was
born
born
far away from
very
where I'm
far
supposed
from
to
where
be,
I'm
and
supposed to be, and so
I'm on my way
I'm on my way
home.
home.
He also mentions the Odyssey in his Nobel lecture. So there's like all of this layering, and it's maddening and also beautiful. And you say, why false prophet? This is just one little verse, right?
Right.
So, in going to see Tiresias, now Tiresias is a figure that's not just in the Odyssey. He is all over literature. I mean, so we see him in Euripides the Bacchae, and I haven't read that since high school. Sophocles' Oedipus and Antigone, Dante's Inferno, Tennyson's Tiresias, Pound's Cantos, Eliot's The Wasteland, Woolf's Orlando. I mean, like, he's everywhere. And that's just a few. That was just a few that I pulled out of my brain, and I could have gone down the deep dive with that, but he's everywhere. And he is the prophet who can only tell truth, which is why Oedipus exiles him, because he tells Oedipus the truth, and Oedipus then sends him away. And so he's a prophet that then Dylan is going to in the like the guy, my fleet-footed guides, fleet-footed refers to Achilles, but they're the guides of the underworld. So there is a clear reference to the Odyssey there, and him actually going to see a prophet. And so he's not the
So
false
he's
one.
not the prophet in this.
Right. He's not. And so it's just like that second verse is like it's insane how dense it is,
Do you think that goes back to your, I mean, we were joking about grammar, but does that go back to your earlier point that when you said that by speaking with a double negative, is he the prophet? So how does that play with, what you just said about him going to the underworld to see the prophet?
I think part of it, if we kind of take the Wicked Messenger, because the Wicked Messenger doesn't speak in 1967. And I think, like, if we put aside, okay, I'm going to put aside the double negative for a moment, but I feel this song is frustration,
Mm.
because he's been held to a different standard than anyone else. And it's probably because he is at a different level than everyone else. But if you read the Music Care speech,
Mm.
there's a lot of frustration. Let's say just
Oh,
frustration. Let's use a
yeah.
nice
I mean,
word.
he kind of does the like a little bit of the in a more funny and more like sweet way, kind of does what Michael Jordan did at his Hall of Fame speech, which is just run down everyone that had doubted him. But
And then
like,
there's Leroy Smith. Now you gotta think that's a myth. Leroy Smith was a guy, when I got cut, he made the team on the varsity team. And he's here tonight. He's still the same 6'7" guy. He's not any bigger. His game is about the same. But he started the whole process with me, because when he made the team and I didn't, but to the coach who actually picked Leroy over me, I wanted to make sure you understood you made a mistake, dude.
Right.
Bob's
This
playful
person,
about it, like,
right,
when he's talking about his voice and like, mentions Tom Waits and
right. No one says
um
this about this guy. And no one says,
yeah.
yeah, these
Yeah.
people didn't like me. And this person believed in me, but this person didn't. Yeah. And so I think there's a consensus when we think about the end of Wicked Messenger, about which opened up his heart. if you can't bring good news, don't bring any. I was thinking about this connection. I'm like, well, what's the next album that comes out? Nashville Skyline. I'm like, no, I think with this song in particular, there it goes back further that he opened up his heart when he first started writing in
Hmm.
earnest,
Hmm.
and everybody rushed in and it was overwhelming for him, and sort of akin to what the new movie A Complete Unknown
I
is
was just
about.
thinking, as we'll
Okay,
soon see in that pull-out shot, crane shot of him writing on his bed, we'll soon see, and then being
right,
chased down
right.
the
No,
street.
right, but it's, it's about a guy who was drowning in Minnesota and went to recreate himself and was drowning and recreated himself again. But in the recreation and when he went to the folk world, when he became a folk artist, they labeled him with something that he wasn't prepared for. And I think that also it bears out in False Prophet. And I'm going to get to that later. But the consensus among critics like Marcusy and Williams and Gill and others is that who read False Prophet biographically is that Dylan is the wicked messenger. I'm like, well, if he's in the wicked messenger here, he's got to be like, he's not the false prophet, like he's protesting. But they see that wicked messenger as the artist, the prophet, the protest Dylan, that he's the reluctant truth teller, the reluctant voice of a generation. And Paul Williams, which I love it, he reads this like in two ways. And he says sarcastic and bitter because of the way people assigned labels to him. Well, bitterness is in the first verse. And so like it all kind of like it fits that he's he's not, I don't think he is the false prophet. I think he's saying he's just an artist and he's been to a different standard.
Yeah, and not only that, he lists himself as not just not a false prophet, but as the enemy, right?
Right.
And the things he's an enemy against are bad
Treason.
things. They're
Right.
they're they're bad things. So it's Bob says he says, I'm the enemy of treason, the enemy of strife. I'm the enemy of the unlived, meaningless life. I ain't no
Mm-hmm.
false prophet. I just know what I know. I go
Right.
where only the lonely can go. So it's sort of like he's stepping into a different kind of role. Like I'm not a prophet,
Right.
but but I share some characteristics of the prophets. I mean, this is the thing that the prophets in the Bible are doing, which is being the
Right.
enemies of all of these immoral traits. And they're sort of hated
Right.
for it. I think Dylan has had a love-hate relationship with being in that role.
And does your brain, this is just a side note. I know
Yes.
that
Yes,
it's
Erin.
no, but like this is just a sidetrack. I go where only the lonely can go. My voice just here, my head hears
Only the
Orbison. Oh my
lonely.
God,
Yeah,
thank you, because
every time.
it's
I'm
also
sure that's intentional.
oh yeah, I'm sure. I was my
He knows
students
that song.
right. I mean, he was in a band with the guy. I mean,
Yeah.
of course. I
That might
mentioned
be
that
even
to
a little tribute to
right.
Orbison, right? I mean,
So and then like I was reading some stuff that it's a Merle Haggard song, and I was like, well, he's
oh,
also like in the music cares, he takes a shot at Merle Haggard. So
yeah,
I would like to think it's a more positive, like I go because it's a positive line where only the lonely can go. Like he's going where he's with Roy Orbison, who
right,
believed,
right, right.
he's the good guy.
But Aaron,
Okay,
I did want to go back to something that
okay,
you mentioned early on. You mentioned the Ed Bradley interview, which of course
yes.
is, I believe, where the famous GIF of Bob Dylan saying "probably" comes from. Would you mind reading the quote that Bob Dylan says?
It was like being in an Edgar Allan Poe story and you're just not that person everybody thinks you are. They call you that all the time. You're the prophet, you're the savior. I never wanted to be a prophet or savior. Elvis, maybe. I could easily see myself becoming Elvis, but prophet, no.
I love that. That's that is such a great, really lucid and specific explanation of
Right.
who he wanted to be and who he became. And like he completely understands who he is to the world, who he is to
Mhm.
himself, and who he wanted to be. Because when we talk about Bob, and we even just calling him Bob, like when we talk about like how he is in the real world, like is he, in this tweet storm that he's been doing lately, like is he a human person? Like yes, he is human.
Bob Dylan waiting for an elevator.
Like he gets it. He gets the
Right.
whole thing. And the way he's sort of spelling it out for Ed Bradley is very descriptive, I think.
Right. And I think too the answer I mean we can drill down a little bit on this because Ed Bradley's like he says I know that and I accept you don't see yourself as the voice of a generation. And he's really trying. So God bless
Right.
Ed
Right.
Bradley for
No, he
trying.
pushed him on it. Yeah.
Right. He said, but some of your songs did stop people cold, and they saw them as anthems, and they saw them as protest songs. It was important in their life. It sparked a movement. You may not have seen it that way, but that's the way it was for them. How do you reconcile those two things? And he's like, my stuff were songs, they weren't sermons. I mean, not yet, right? Um, if if you
Right.
examine the songs, I don't believe you're going to find anything in there that says I'm a spokesman for anybody or anything really. And Bradley's like, but they saw it. And he's like, yeah, but they must not have heard the song. He's so plainly, like you're saying, but that's not it. But then it gets into this,
No, but wait, but keep going because like it seems like Bob's being antagonistic and like Bob knows he was the voice of a generation. Like he
right.
knows that. So keep going.
It's ironic, the way that people viewed you was just the polar opposite of the way you viewed yourself. And he says, ain't that something?
Ain't that something?
I know, ain't.
He knows. He gets it. And this is all a performance of something. So, but where he's like blending reality and fiction and a character almost in a way of I'm aware of that whole thing, but
Right.
I'm still going to push back at you just like I did 40 years ago when people asked me these questions.
But that's the interview. And this is what I remember so distinctly is when he says he thinks the press are people you lie to. And then I was like, well, you can't believe a damn word he says in this whole interview because he just admitted he's lying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was like, bravo, well done.
I
Because
mean
I was
that
in
that is
listen,
just the perfect, and I can picture it if I close my eyes, I can picture it Bob with his head, cocked
right.
to the side a little bit and just without, just saying,
Isn't that something?
I
Yeah.
just that
And
is that's
yeah,
why I love Bob Dylan.
right. He's got his Bob Dylan mask on all the time.
Right. Right. I mean, he is something.
But I mean, and then I think it gets into, I mean, that whole aspect with the Ed Bradley interview and that exchange gets into then this idea that T.S. Eliot is bringing up in tradition, the individual talent is like, there is something there that the artist intends, right? There's authorial intent. And Dylan didn't intend for his songs to hit the way they did. I mean, I'm sure he's grateful they did because they started his career, but once the art is out there, the artist has no control over how the art's received, how it's interpreted. And so that may be something that the world came in when he opened his heart by putting a song out there that he really didn't realize would hit as big as it did. And so that might be part of the honesty of this song was that he opened his heart to the world and the world came in, and that can be overwhelming.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, look what it's sort of like the consequences of opening your heart. Like a normal
Right.
person opens their heart to the world and no one hears it, no one blinks,
Right.
Nothing,
Right. Or
crickets.
three
But
people
Bob Dylan,
retweet it.
right? But Bob Dylan opens his heart and it changed the world.
I think on that same line in the seventh verse, it he says, "You don't know me, darling. You never would guess." And I think like there's that. I don't know that if you could have the chutzpah to say that this song or that the album should be reordered, I feel like there's pairings in this song that are so far from each other that I want to put them closer together. I want to be the TS I want to be the Ezra Pound to his TS Eliot in the Wasteland. Like I want to edit this a little bit.
Yeah.
But he says, "You don't know me, darling, never guess." And then he says, "I'm nothing like my ghostly appearance would suggest." And I'm like, next time I'm like, is this diamonds and rust? Like that note. I'm like, okay. But
Well, I'll be damned.
maybe
There goes your ghost again.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And so, but I'm just saying, like, and that's the figure they still like that most people associate the prophet with the 1960s folk Dylan that's associated with Joan Baez. And so maybe that, and he was the gaunt kid at in that moment. So there's a
Yeah.
connection there, maybe.
I think also he has made reference also to, first of all, to ghosts, period.
Right, right.
Spirit on the Water comes to
Mhm.
mind. In terms of talking, being reflective and talking about his appearance or whatever as a ghost, and certainly the imagery of the album with the sort of angel and of death with the syringe. There's some spooky stuff here in
Right.
the imagery. He also does this thing where he's sort of not boastful, but again, very self-aware. Like so in the next verse, and I'll come back to the seventh in a minute, but it says, I'm the
Okay.
first among equals, second to none. I'm the last of the
Mhm.
best. You can bury the rest. Bury them
Right.
naked with their silver and gold. Put them 6 feet under and then pray for their souls. The seventh one, you don't know me, darling. You never would guess. So when he's
Right.
saying these like phrases with that guitar lick behind them,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
he's almost boastful, like listing his like he's kind of like I've still got it. Like despite my ghostly appearance, my
Right.
age, whatever, that first among equals line kind of has that same effect.
Right.
Now, when you see him live, it's like, yeah, you are the first among equals.
He
It's
also does that cheeky little like that head. Remember,
yeah.
like in Memphis, especially where he kind of like does that little head like jolt to the side, and he smiles when he smirks when at least once
Yes.
or
He
twice
knows
I've seen
that.
him
And
like smirk, right?
yeah, it's flirty. It's flirty. And
Right,
so like I mean, so I think this song, because of lines like that,
right.
really lend itself to live performance. And this song has been performed a whopping 207 times.
We
First
had
on November 2nd, 2021 in Milwaukee, which I was at. And as of this recording tonight on October 10th, 2024, we're at 207. By November 14th, when this current tour ends, it will have been performed 230 times. So, Erin, tell me about seeing and hearing this song live.
it's well, I mean, we've seen it five, six times together. I don't know. I think my favorite was the first night in Memphis. That first night in Memphis, I think that was the better night, right? Was
Yeah, yeah, for
that
sure.
was the night that he went off stage because of his ear monitors, and we both
I know
had
we
a
freaked out.
we had a moment
Yeah.
where I looked back at you because you were like a row or two back, and I looked at you, and you had your hands like, and I was,
Yeah,
yeah, we had a moment.
I was
But
worried.
besides that, the performance, I mean, his vocal was just, I mean, he is, there is something, you're right, like cheeky about how he's performing it, that he knows this is like his badass song. But
Yes,
there,
yes.
like he's just like there, and just that the opening guitar riff, like here it comes, like, and he almost like swaggers through and I think I wrote that in Ray's review, like he has swagger in his voice when he sings this, and he's having fun, and he knows we're having fun with it, and so there's just an energy when he plays this song that I love. That
Yeah,
it's
there's
just
no question he shines in live performance when he and
right,
his band do blues songs for sure.
right,
Especially
yeah.
blues songs that he's written that they're and Bob Britt knows that riff very well.
Mhm.
He's not ripping solos. He is playing
No,
very precisely what he's prescripted to play. And there was I don't know if you remember this, Aaron, but we'll come back to the live stuff in a second, but
okay.
right at the beginning, when this album dropped during the pandemic, Blake Mills, who plays the riff on the album, did on his Instagram, which people had to send me because I'm not on, he released a whole bunch of videos showing how-tos, how he played those songs from Rough and Rowdy
Right,
Ways.
yeah.
And they're not on Instagram anymore. Clearly,
No, they're not.
there
Right.
someone told him to take them down. You can find them on Daily Motion, but um I will just never forget that clearly the false prophet with the slide guitar and his
Mhm.
Fender playing that the sort of close up, and it's like, this is so cool. We get to see how a Bob Dylan song is played by the guy who played it.
He broke kfab.
Yeah, he broke kayfabe. Yeah, that's right.
Kayfabe, there you go. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. No, but I think too, this is a song that he stands and plays the guitar, he plays the piano at. Like some
Yes.
songs he sits, but he stands the whole time, and he kind of like he swaggers through it. Like he does a little
Yeah.
like Elvis move, right?
Yes,
Like
yes, and he's
it's
doing
a,
that sort of stance with his legs,
yeah,
making like
like
a triangle, a
right, like he's
teepee.
standing in a straddle, and he's just kind of like does a little Elvis shimmy throughout
Yeah,
it, and it's like to the guitar riff and the drum. It's he is this is like true active performance in a way that we don't always see Bob like in the moment, I guess, like with us, and he knows that we're like totally vibing off of his little shimmy, like every little thing he
I
does.
love this song live. I
Yes.
mean, such a banger in Milwaukee in 2021. So every single song he did after this one, it was sort of like, oh, he's doing the whole album. Like
Yeah.
it was, and I think for anyone that saw the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour for the first time, experienced that in that way. I mean, and what I love about the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour as its own thing, and it's amazing that it was interrupted by the Outlaw tour, which was in a completely different way, but equally as amazing, that it's resumed and is
Right.
continuing to be amazing. And it's so cool that I've now seen False Prophet 12 times. Like you go to a Rough and Rowdy Ways show and you're just going to get the whole album, which is
Mhm.
when has he done that? It's sort of like, bands now go on anniversary tours where they do their classic albums. Bob is doing it in real time right now.
Right.
So
Right.
getting to your False Prophet, to me, it's not one that I'm like, all right, great, here comes False Prophet. Like I'm stoked every time.
Yes. I get to see it in 2 weeks. I'm
Where,
so
Aaron?
in Paris, one of my favorite cities. I'm going to see Bob. But
Now, have you
this,
ever seen Bob Dylan in Paris before?
I have not.
Have you ever seen him abroad?
I have not. It's my
Oh,
first Bob Dylan abroad show.
how many times have you
So
seen Bob Dylan?
I don't know. I forget. See, like, so here's the thing. Like, I know that people have their countdown, and I'll start to count, and I'll forget. Like, oh, I did see him at that show too, and then I have to add that. Like, I probably should have them written down and have an Excel spreadsheet like I have for everything else, but I
Right,
don't. And I know it's up there. Like, it's not as many. Like, I would say like between 30 and 50. I'm like, it's not as many as other people did because I was very poor in grad school for a while
right.
and I didn't go to any concerts.
Right, right, right.
So, but
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like when Roberta Rakov likes to say, "I didn't know you were supposed to count then." You know.
yeah. I just like because there are some that I'm like, oh right, I went to that one too, and I'm like, oh yeah, and then like I'll forget one show in '99 that I'm like, oh yeah, I did go to that one. It's an inaccurate count.
That's amazing. You both don't have the photographic memory of Michael Glover Smith and Adam Selzer, and also
No,
the your own need to be completely organized by making a spreadsheet.
I do. I need to do that, but I think that
There is
so.
a website that does it for you. It's called
I
BobServe.
know. I know there is, and I need to do that. But okay, so that the verse you just brought up, and we
Mm.
can thank. So Laura Tenchert sees that I'm first among equals, second to none, as being Bob kind of uh, in his cheeky way. This is his first album since being awarded the Nobel Prize, and so he's kind of
Uh-huh.
boasting a little, and I
Yeah.
love that. But
As he
also
should.
he should, of course. But Richard Thomas, who is the classicist, has given us this lovely interpretation that we have Augustus Caesar, who said, "I'm first among equals, second to none." And then Julius Caesar, what would Julius Caesar do? So that's another thing I love about this is there are so many references to other songs on the album in this song that it again creates that thread.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of sort of intertextuality between
yes,
within the world of the album. Like many Bob Dylan albums, it's sort of
right.
its own universe. And
Yes.
the Julius Caesar thing, I mean, Adam Selzer pointed out on our episode on Lenny Bruce that
Mhm.
around this time, he gave a lot of good evidence that around this time, pretty much starting in like 2018, 2019, Dylan seemed to be interested in and maybe even obsessed with assassination
Mhm.
and, a lot of Caesar stuff. So yeah, that's
I'm last of the best. You can bury
yeah,
the rest.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, according to Richard Thomas. So there you go. And then when he says, "What are you looking at? There's nothing to see, just a cool breeze encircling me." So it could be the Book of the Dead. And the quote is, "Be certain that conceptual thoughts and fleeting memories are not strictly identifiable. Be insubstantial in their motion." Okay, is this Bob or what? That fleeting memories are not strictly identifiable, be insubstantial in their motion, but insubstantial in their motion, like breezes of the atmosphere. Look at your own mind to see whether it is like that or not.
It's
There's
so
nothing to see.
interesting because to me the part of that stanza that just stops me dead in my tracks is the first part is the what are you looking at? There's nothing to see.
Nothing to
The
see.
the sort of asking the question and then answering it and who is he talking to?
Right.
Um
Cops in New Jersey.
I'm Bob Dylan.
But his hoodie was up, so you can't talk to
Sorry, sir, I don't know who that is.
him.
I'm just looking for Bruce Springsteen's house. You better come with us, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah,
Okay, but yeah, you're right, because it's almost threatening. Like, what are you
right.
looking at? Yeah,
Yeah. I sort of picture him, with a gun in that, music video in black and white. What are you looking at?
right. There's nothing to see. And then he says like hello stranger, hello and goodbye. Again, it's like there's this always this sort of underlying threat. And um there I think this sort of like reinforces the seventh verse in a way, but it's a potential reference to a Carter family song. So on.
Hello, stranger. Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but he says hello, and then you rule the land, but so do I. And this is the person where I think if we go back to the false prophet in Revelation, is it Revelations? But the false prophet who takes control, is it by electing? Hold on, let me go up.
I don't
There's
know that Bible. I don't know a lot about.
I know. I did put Deuteronomy first in my list, and that was out of respect. No, it's Mark 13:22. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even elect. And so it's people in power that can be false prophets. And so that you rule the land, and so do I. It's people who rule either by media influence or political power or wealth who have, who are lusty old mules, as he says.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But
That's
and
such a
he's
great Bob Dylan line right there.
oh my yeah, it's almost as good as the grapes suck out the juice. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think that that's really interesting because I love I like you, and he says like you've got a poisoned brain. And so whoever is the false prophet who takes power, or they're ruling based on some sort of nefarious means, then they're poisoned in some way. And he says, I'm going to marry you to a ball and chain. Now, this goes with the last. and
But wait,
we
before
were going to
you
go
you
line
get
by
into
line.
that, wait, but before
What?
you get into that,
Okay.
Aaron, the ball and chain. So this seemed to me like he was like misusing a metaphor. Because you'd think
100%.
of I'm gonna marry that you're married to you refer to your ball and chain when you're
Right.
married, right? Like I got to check with my old ball and
Right.
chain. It's not a nice thing, by the way, to say about a spouse, and I never would.
No.
But it's
Horrible.
married to a ball and chain.
Right. And so to me, I think that's like almost locking someone up, right? Okay, same, and it's the same metaphor
Absolutely.
though,
Yeah.
right? And so the image paired with the one below, when he says, "I ain't no false prophet, I'm nobody's bride,"
Right, right,
and I'm like, it's the ball and chain, right?
right, right.
But I wonder, like, he won't be tied down or married to any singular identity, and I wonder if he uses the feminine here to work with the previous image because a bride is given a new identity. Like
Hmm.
when she gets married, she changes her name, and
Which
so
he
like
did,
I'm
by the way. He changed his
which
name.
he did,
Yeah.
but exactly. And so like I'm wondering, like if he's like I'm nobody's bride, like I'm not going to be married to that image that you
Right.
have of me, I'm my own person. And then that can't remember when I was born, and I forgot when I died. I think it's another, maybe a Buddhist reference where every moment has its own birth and death, past, present, and future, or today, tomorrow, and yesterday too. And so like I feel like they're
Mm,
like
mm,
it's sort of like birth and death happen simultaneously, and they're both
hmm.
to be celebrated, and they happen in the same moment with an inhalation and an exhalation. And
Hmm.
then if he's singing it and he's inhaling and exhaling, it's birth and death in the same moment.
When I love these secret autobiographical songs that he does where he's commenting on the way in which the world has made him and how he has either rejected it or he's just commenting on it. I was thinking of that line in Dreaming of You where he
Mm-hmm.
says like, first they locked me in a cage, then they threw me onto the stage. But that sort of idea that being Bob Dylan has come at a heavy price for him, and maybe his only way to cope with that is to sort of fight against it.
Right. And you can also, I think it works if it's not just strictly autobiographical, because I mean clearly we're reading this and we're looking at like we're reading his life into this, so we're doing that type of reading. But I think it's for anyone, because we when we think about our own identities, there are the ways that we're perceived, and then there's the way we think of ourselves, and there may be crossovers, and we're not Bob Dylan, and I'm not suggesting that any of us are subject to the same kind of scrutiny, but it does apply, because we all have these moments where people look at us and they see something that we're like, oh, I'm not that, like I'm not just that. That's, there's a whole other world. And even today, I'll use this as just a silly example, but like my students any of us have fragmented knowledges of each other, or experiences. So my students see me 85 minutes twice a week. And I was joking this morning, they had they're writing their Bob Dylan essays. And I said, have you seen the Levi's commercial with Beyonce? The good looking kid who looks at Beyonce is Levi Dylan. That's Dylan's grandson. And so they looked at it, and I said, well, his Instagram, his social media is just a thirst trap. And one of my students laughed, and I was like, what's funny? He said, you said thirst trap. And I was like, do you think they lock me in a closet when
Yeah.
the class is over?
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
live in the
They
world.
threw you
Like,
onto a stage, then they locked you in a cage. Yeah.
no, but it's just so
Yeah.
funny, because like for him, it's like, no, I'm the teacher and I don't know what a thirst trap is. And
Right.
I
Of
have
course.
to
No,
say,
I understand. It's
right,
like when you
right.
see, I'm sure you experience this as a student, as a teacher, when you see your teacher in the real world. It's
In the
weird.
wild.
I
Yeah.
can't tell you, and this happens to me all the time. I'm not a teacher anymore, but I do work at a school, and it's very common that I see the students at our school at synagogue, at whether
Right.
my synagogue, their synagogue, whatever, or any
Right.
other Jewish event, and they're always weird. They don't know how to talk to me. It doesn't matter the age, and
Right.
I think, part of that is like, I think, if any one of us were to meet Bob Dylan, there would be that experience. How do I act? What do I do? The frozen, being frozen.
Would you
And
be like, I would make
yeah,
that noise
yeah,
probably. Like,
I don't know. I don't know what I would do. But I think for Bob Dylan, he experiences dealing with people in a just sort of the mirror of that. Like he's
right.
aware that he's having that effect on people. So
Right.
either he shuts down intentionally, or he also is. I mean, people have said that he's also very awkward, like a weird dude.
Right. But could
So
you, go ahead.
yeah,
And then
well,
I'll
so I
make,
mean, like it's sort of partially in that experience when you see a student in real life and they don't know how to act, you also or I should speak for myself. I also don't in many ways like
oh, you
know
can
how to
speak for
act
me.
all the time.
Right. And it's sort of like we made the point, sort of an extended point, is like we all go through that, where we are a particular role to a particular person and they see us in that way. And, that some of those things kind of stick with us, where it may not be accurate to how we see ourselves. But can you imagine, for the majority of your life, from your early 20s, you know, you suck all the oxygen out of the room when you
Right.
come in, because people do that. Like, they want to be near you, they want something from you, they want answers from you, and it must be just fucking exhausting. It's
Right.
just like, and he's kind of pushing back, where he's just like, when at the end, when he says, what kind of life I live, he's lived the life of an artist. He's lived on the road. He's also lived a meaningful life. That's the life he's lived. When he says, darling, the kind of life that I live, you've seen it. I have lived my life publicly from the time I was 21 years old, or 20 years old. Like he has been out in the public. Like, what he's lived. He's been honest. He's been authentic. He opened his heart to the world. He's been an artist, and his life has had meaning. So he is the enemy of the unlived, unmeaningful life. Like, he says it at the end, right before he's like, I can't remember when I was born and I forgot when I died. Like, it's like all of it's happening. That recreation of Bob Dylan happens all the time.
Yeah, and because it's sort of like I don't remember when this version of me was born,
Right.
and
Are we
or
going to segue now?
and I right. Coming up next on Songs of Experience, my own version of you. And then thinking about whatever, when Robert Zimmerman or whatever, Bobby
Right.
died, that version of him. And I think for Bob Dylan, the previous version of him is constantly dying and constantly
Hmm.
being born. I mean, like you said,
Right.
he is always he's still searching for his way home
Right. And then
in many ways.
he says, like, when your smile meets my smile, something's got to give. And like, that's what you're talking about. Like, if you bumped into him, like, you would be awkward, he would be awkward. Like
Right.
something there has got to give. And so
Right. Because
there,
the
if we're
next
reading
line
this
is the reminder, I ain't no false prophet. In case you
right,
didn't hear
I'm
me this
nobody's
entire song, and I'm
right,
nobody's bride. I don't necessarily belong to you.
right, exactly. And so if we're going to read this autobiographically, which I think it's hard not to, maybe with especially with this album, that
Yeah.
I mean, he is layering all of these images and kind of becoming art and becoming history and kind of weaving into the matrix of that, but he's also pushing back on that identity that he's been stuck with for 7 decades.
This song quietly is quite staggering in terms of sheer amount of words and lyrics. I mean,
Mhm.
this song is 10 stanzas,
Right.
and for a blues song, it clocks in at 6 minutes. Like this is
Yep.
not just like a quick little fun blues song. I mean, 10 stanzas, we're getting into like Desolation Row territory,
It's a commitment. Yeah. And
and so
it's
certainly to play it live every night too, like that's,
right.
I mean, most of his songs, when he plays them live are between probably 5 and 8 minutes anyway.
Right.
But I mean, this is a heavy, big song. This isn't just, I mean, this album is, as the kids say, no skips, right? But this isn't just that break in the album where you get a nice blues song. There's a lot going on at the moment.
In the business, we say that's a dense text.
Mm. Hmm.
It's got a lot going on.
Hmm.
Music, like sonically, lyrically, like it just doesn't let up.
No.
Like it really, I mean, there's a lot going on. And you're right, it doesn't just give us a little reprieve. It's like it's constantly forcing you to focus and refocus and figure it out. And I don't know if we figured it out, but I feel like maybe we made some headway. And I'm sure in a week I'll be like, Henry, we didn't say this, and I'll have found something else in it.
Is there anything you can think of right now? Anything else you want to say about this?
There is the Chan master, Hukai, who wrote The Gateless Gate, and it is from the 17th of the koans. It says he carried an iron yoke with no hole and left a curse to trouble his descendants. If you want to hold up the gate and the doors, you must climb a mountain of swords with your bare feet. And so
Wow.
it's if it's I don't know if Dylan has found Zen because holding up the gates and the doors, as far as I know from class prep and reading, is practicing Zen and finding enlightenment. And so when he's climbing the mountain of swords on his bare feet, maybe has he found enlightenment.
Hmm.
So that was
This,
really, oh, and the Holy Grail. Also, the Holy Grail,
oh yeah,
it refers to the cup of, the cup of Christ, the Last Supper.
you
And right in
chose
that,
poorly.
exactly. Well, that no, that's okay. Also in Arthurian legend, but it's in Indiana Jones, and he
Yep.
mentions Indiana Jones on the album. But the next line, he sings the songs of love, like Jesus, the songs of betrayal. Jesus was betrayed. And so, like,
Mm,
so
mm.
there's like, there are lots of layered references. And I'm sure there's more references in those lines than the ones that I just pulled out. But I thought the Holy Grail, because of Indiana Jones, and thank you for going there,
Oh,
was
of
really,
course. I mean,
yeah,
Rob Kelly and I have done two different shows on his network about
right.
Indiana Jones, so that is very close to me. And also Indiana Jones is mentioned in this album.
Right. That's it. Yeah. It's another intertextual reference.
Yeah,
There's Indiana Jones there. Right.
yeah.
And those British bad boys, the Rolling Stones.
Amazing. All right, so I'm going to leave you with a exit question, Aaron, before I let
Okay.
you go,
All right.
and then you'll tell me where folks can find and such. Okay, so you're going to see Bob Dylan at the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour
Hmm.
in Paris, right? Bob Dylan has to drop one song from Rough and Rowdy Ways set. What song is he dropping, and what song are you adding to that set list? This is your dream song that you've always wanted to hear live, but you have to kill a song from Rough and Rowdy Ways.
I mean, Black Rider can go.
Okay, that was easy.
I mean, I'm sorry to those who love Black Rider if you're listening. It's the one. I think, I don't know who told me this, and if it was you and you don't want to rat yourself out, you don't have to, but that's the one where someone in our crew, in our extended crew, said that's the one when I go to the bathroom.
Right, right. No, someone did say that it wasn't me. Mine was Old Black Magic, which
Okay.
now I don't
Which, of
have. Now I
course,
don't have a bathroom break anymore.
I know. What would I add? I don't
You
know.
don't have a wish list song you've always wanted to hear? Like as we've been talking offline in our group chat, like Dignity is my number one.
Right.
You don't have a wish list song? You can
I
say
think
like Joker Man or something. It's
no,
okay.
no, it's not
Or
Joker
Groom's still
Man.
waiting
I'm
at the
just
altar or something.
no, the groom's still waiting at the altar. That's hilarious. We just saw Silvio, so I mean, like, and you were so cute. You're like, you got your Silvio. That was the cutest thing ever.
Yeah, I
And
guess you
I
already
mean, I
got
saw
yours.
I did. And I mean, like, it's always something like, here's the thing. My friend Jason, who is the first guest on my show, he and I had a conversation once. We're like, well, he didn't play this and he didn't play that. And I think it's always like a situational thing. Like right now, probably I would want to hear him sing I and I. I
Mhm.
love that song. And I would, it's such a beautiful song that I would love to see it live. But Jay, and it goes periodically of what I'm listening to and what I'm kind
Mhm.
of like focused on. But I think like Jason and I sat
You're
down, we're like, well, he did
perpetually focused on 80s Dylan, so
always.
Oh,
Right now I am. Fun fact, because Court and I are editing the book on the 80s right now. So
right.
we're gearing up to read the chapters. But Jason and I said, like, well, every show we're like, well, he didn't play this, he didn't play that. And like if he played every single thing I wanted to hear in any particular show, he would just be playing for me for 3 days.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Of course.
I want to hear everything.
But
And then
this is a magical fake scenario. You have to pick one song that you would want to hear. Like I and I, that's fine.
or you're gonna make me lonesome when you go.
Okay,
Like,
great.
yeah.
I'd
I
love
mean,
he better not
I,
play that if I'm not there.
could you imagine? And then
Yeah.
I'm like, Henry, maybe he'll play it next show.
Yeah,
And then
right.
you got you're gonna make me lonesome. And
Right.
it'll be a nice moment. But no, I think I and I would be like just transformative, but just very sentimentally, you're gonna make me lonesome when you go.
I love it. I love it. All right, Erin. Well, where can folks find you to talk about Bob Dylan or to listen to your fabulous podcast?
Okay, so you can find me through the FM Dylan Pods. It's Infinity Goes Up on Trial. I also have a Substack, Infinity Goes Up on Trial, and my Instagram and my X handle are in the fishbowl 16.
You
And
can
I
call it
know
Twitter.
folks
It's okay.
Twitter. I know, just the Twitter.
And I should say fish is spelled not like
PHISH.
yeah, like
Yeah.
the band, not like the
Like the band, but it's my and I do okay, I did tour with Fish and I did go to a bunch of Fish shows, but it is my nickname. And when I got my PhD, the Fish with an F got changed by David to PH. So that's it's
Oh,
in the fish
oh.
bowl.
I don't think I ever knew that. I just figured you were a
I
fish
think I
fan like
told you,
me.
but it was like at a meetup and it was loud and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Maybe
no,
like
I
at that
do
first meetup in Chicago or something.
probably where we became best friends fast forever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's great. And I will say I have been lucky to be interviewed by you twice, and most recently for Infinity Goes Up on Trial, and it's a really fun experience. And the
That
Substack's really fun
episode
because you can watch the episode too. So
yes, and it's well lit. But that episode, our director was like, "That was the best episode ever." Right? Did he or did he not?
he did
He
say
was
that.
very
He did
excited.
say
So
that.
we can hype that, and that will come out on January 1st. And that will be both of our birthday episodes, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can blow
Pleasure,
a little
friend.
more smoke up your ass, I should say that I changed the release date of my podcast in reverence and deference to you. So I really, I really, really love it. And I love that the first of the month we get that, the 15th of the month we get this.
I am so grateful that you did that. I'm grateful to that you have talked to me so many times about Bob Dylan. I'm grateful that we text almost every day about Bob Dylan. And I am so as I said this, and I said this when we were together in Chicago, and I cannot say enough. I'm so proud of what you do and grateful for what you do with this podcast because you add so much to the conversation and you are just a happy piece of bubble gum. You are such a happy and just wonderful human being. And your love for Bob Dylan is contagious. And you have so much knowledge to share. And I'm so glad you're doing this.
Thank
And
you. Thank
I,
you.
I'm just grateful to have been a part of it. So thank you.
The feeling is mutual, and I'll see you over on our text thread.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
I look
much, Aaron.
forward. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you so much for listening and watching. Please look for the next episode on the 15th day of the month in all of your podcast feeds. Give us a follow on Twitter at Songs of Bob. If you're subscribing on Apple Podcasts, please take a moment and give us a rating and review. For a video version of this podcast, please visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@songsofbobdylan. You can email us at songsofbobdylan@gmail.com. Thank you to my friend and mentor, Rob Kelly, for designing our fabulous logo, and to my mandolin teacher, Mark Mitchell, from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago, for teaching me how to play the intro and the outro. If you would like to help support the cost of hosting my podcasts, go to patreon.com/gonzo3249. For $5, I'll show my gratitude by giving you a shout out on the show of your choice. For $10, I'll also send you a surprise piece of vintage Bob Dylan merch. So big thank you to Rob Kelly, Roberta Rakov, Matt Simonson, and Christopher Vani. Truly, I love you all. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.